1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, we're good.
I just
Okay.
hit the record button, so we're good to go.
Okay, great. All right, we'll start. Good evening. Welcome to the Crystal and Pentagon Cities Council meeting for 26 June 2023. The overall mission of the CPCC is to provide with staff support, periodic monitoring, evaluation, identification of emerging issues and potential solutions on all dimensions of implementing the Crystal City Sector Plan, the Pentagon City Sector Plan, to assure achievement of the plan's goals and objectives over the life of the plans. We have a quorum this evening, and we're holding this virtual meeting in accordance with the Arlington County e-meeting policy, which we readopted at our last meeting in April. Okay, so this evening we're going to cover a couple of topics. We'll mascot development schedule update. Then we've got an update on the Crystal Houses planning. There was a kind of a zoning clarification for the Pentagon City Sector Plan that we'll go over, and Matt will just discuss it, and we can have some questions. I sent a note out on that. We're going to go back to a couple things from the last meeting. We'll talk a little bit more about construction staging, and we've got a zoning inspector from the county here today, Aaron Shura, who'll be able to take some questions on how that works. And then we'll return to our large amenities discussion. And I did a commitment to get a letter put together, and I still haven't done that. So I apologize for that. We can talk about that a bit more. Let's see, two notes tonight. Ben Devanzo's probably not going to make it tonight because he and his wife just had their second baby in the last couple of days. And then Pablo Lopez has moved on to another position outside the county. So Matt's running a little higher gear these days with helping us get this set up and then doing all his other work. Okay. It looks like we've got some folks, members of the public joining us tonight. So we're going to run through the agenda, and then at the end of our discussion, we'll take some public comment, should you have any. Okay, Matt, do you want to pick it up?
Yep, let me see if I can share my screen. Again, I have two presentations queued up, so I can stop after the development update and then pick back up on the other zoning ordinance amendment after we hear from about the Crystal Houses. However you guys want to proceed. So let me get this queued up. All right, can everybody see that?
Yes.
How about now? All right.
Yes.
Looks good.
All right, so as we tend to do in most meetings, and for those that maybe haven't seen this, the grouping of projects that you're going to see on the next two slides, three, is really geared towards the way in which current planning in the CPHD department that I'm a part of organizes projects based on how they're coming in. And a lot of times we kind of progress gradually from just a concept and initial idea to something more preliminary. And finally, in that last category of final applications, these are not final in the sense that they've been approved, but really they're ready for public engagement and the typical site plan review committee process, and sometimes the long range planning committee process. So with that, much of what you see on the approved set mirrors what we've seen 3-4 months ago when we last met, with the addition of the Americana Hotel site and Crystal Towers. Those are now behind us. County board approved them. We're actually in a very unique window where at the present moment, let's just say for this week, we don't have any final applications, but we do have a number of preliminary applications that will imminently become final because of the different stages that they are in review of our acceptance process. So looking beyond the approved projects, actually I can transition here. The preliminary ones that will likely begin their site plan review committee meetings or long range planning committee meetings in the fall include River House, the 12th Street Landing on the Brookfield site. We also have Pentagon Center, PDSP, the Costco block that has come in for a major update to their amendment. And then we also have the Crystal Plaza Apartments submitted by Dweck, and the 2525 Crystal Drive is also gearing up for their process. So I would anticipate that as all of these ultimately become accepted throughout the summer, we're going to be scheduling a lot of public engagement starting in September. So this quietness that we see right now in terms of public meetings is going to quickly dissipate. And in terms of tracking pure numbers, we're actually still reviewing the complete makeup and use mix in terms of the overall density that's being proposed. So as that information becomes finalized and the projects progress through their different review processes, we're going to start filling in the information in this table and kind of continue to track that. So that's everything I have on the development tracking side of the equation. Happy to take any questions and pause until we're ready to discuss the zoning ordinance amendment.
Thanks, Matt. Can you just clarify a couple of things? I think you said that the 2525 Crystal Drive, and Taylor's not here this evening, he had a business commitment, but did they no longer need the building height study to be completed to move forward on that? Okay.
Yeah, they've revised their design such that they can stay within the existing sector plan height guidance.
Okay. And then this new item, the Pentagon City PSP, can you give a little bit of discussion about the scope of that, or is there anything you can tell us about that in terms of, I don't know, how big it is, how long it'll take?
No, it's an interesting proposal, and I believe some of the civic associations may have already received a presentation from Kimco and their land use attorney, Evan Pritchard. What this essentially does is go back to the last set of use mixes and density allocations for that block. So just the Costco block, which I think we most recently updated in 2015, if I'm not mistaken. And what's happening there is that you've seen the two initial residential buildings come online. The Milton, I think, is now open. But with those two residential towers along Joyce, or Hayes, I'm sorry, those represent really the complete residential land use allocation for that block. So any subsequent phases of development would require either hotel, commercial, or hotel or office uses. And as a result, and in light of all the changes that have happened surrounding that block, particularly with the Pentagon City Sector Plan and some of the densities that that plan established, Kimco has submitted an application that initially reallocates the use mixes where some of the office space, I think, is being replaced with residential, not all of it, but some. And there's a significant increase in all densities across the board, along with some minor expansion of the open space. The other big change, I think, if you're familiar with the previous 2015 vision, is that a lot of their open space was going to front along Fern Street. They are now looking to swap that such that it will kind of mirror what Met Park did, where the buildings are on the perimeter of the block and the open space would be in the center of the block. What I think you're going to see over the next couple of weeks, months, is as this gets through staff's review and we begin to have the public engagement process, there's going to be a lot of, I think, association and review and comparison between this application and what a similar application that's following the Pentagon City Sector Plan would need to comply with. Because I think the applicant in this case has already started to make some of those comparisons as a way to justify their request. So staff is currently looking to make sure we're doing that across the board on all topics, whether it's affordable housing, density, open space, the green ribbon, and making sure that as we begin the public process, all those things are available for discussion.
Okay.
stop
So
this, and some hands
basically,
up.
want to get sorry. So you would aim to bring them into at least the intent of the Pentagon City Sector Plan. That would be the general goal.
Yeah, they're technically outside of the planning area and the district, but I think they proactively kind of open the door and want to be considered in that same criteria as if they were. So I think we're going to see how far that path can go and what does it mean for them.
Okay. Okay, good. Does anybody have any comments or questions about that? I know that donut hole has been a little frustrating at times, and it sounds like we've got an opportunity to get some alignment, if either in design intent or actual alignment of walking paths and pedestrian ways.
I think Pam had her hand up first.
Oh, yeah.
And then I think Rich after her, and then Carol.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
missed it. Yeah, sorry, Pam, go ahead.
My question is, what and where is the 12th Street Landing?
Oh, that's just a fancy name of calling the TSA site that Brookfield owns. So actually right across the street from
Oh,
12th.
okay, thank you. I had no, a
I
landing
think I got that
for
right.
what? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Cool.
Matt, just a quick question on the Kimco site. Have they indicated if the Costco has a plan to leave, or how long is left on the Costco lease? Obviously, that impacts a large area of the site. Just curious if they've articulated anything related to the Costco tenancy.
Nothing that we haven't heard before. I think we still have several decades left on that lease. What the current proposal accomplishes in a small way is that it sets up Kimco in the next couple of decades to have better options at, I think, implementing the greater vision for that block, even if Costco were to continue and complete its lease, and therefore the sites fronting on Hayes would not be held up by that decision. So I think you're going to see some new street alignments and connectivity that clearly separate the Costco portion of the block and its operations from really the entire western edge and even southern edge of that block that perhaps could come in independently should that happen prior to Costco making some type of a big change. But beyond that, long-term positioning, really, we're not really seeing any imminent projects in that development or PDSP proposal.
Great. Thanks, Matt.
Okay. Great.
Yeah, I just lowered my hand because that was the question that I had as well. And my recollection of a couple of months ago is that this is being staged so that the office buildings are first, the Costco's way out in the future.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, in the Milton has this walkthrough passage that seems to anticipate something on the other side of it. It doesn't really go anywhere at the moment, but it looks. I like it because it breaks up that the edifice of that building. There's somebody, Ajin. Are you here for somebody else, or are you a member of the public?
Yeah, hi, I'm Aidi Muradovic, the new liaison from the Transportation Commission.
Oh, excellent.
So it's my thank you. This is my first meeting, and in terms of this Kimco site, I think wearing my Transportation Commission hat, we're really looking forward to this site getting broken up a little bit in terms of connectivity so people can pass through, and it sounds like that's going to be happening, and that would be in accordance with the master transportation plan, which is really against these huge super blocks that people have to go around and cannot pass through. So the fact that they're kind of interested in aligning this separate sector plan with the Pentagon City Center plan, the existing one, sounds great. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Ajin. Rich, do you have any comments on your 12th Street landing? Everything going okay there? Are you anything you can tell us about that?
Yeah, we've submitted for PDSP approval over the last few months. I mean, Matt probably knows a little bit better as to where it exactly is in the process, but I think we're looking to get comments from staff sometime in the near future, and then we'll react to those comments. But generally, our PDSP submission is, in our opinion, very in conformity with the Pentagon City sector plan. I think we worked, obviously, Brookfield and myself personally were very involved in the process of developing the sector plan with the county. We were very hands-on and provided a lot of input. So I think our plan that was submitted a few months ago is, again, very close to conformity with the sector plan. So we're looking forward to comments and then going from there, obviously.
Great.
Matt, I don't know if you have any other insight.
No, that's exactly right. And like I mentioned, really everything in the red that you see on the screen is very close to, I think, being accepted or, being ready to start their public engagement process in September. So we're going to be closely monitoring and evaluating potential dates as I think all these different meetings start to come online. In addition to what I believe will also be public engagement opportunities for the special club studies that are happening near 23rd Street. I think those are also reaching that milestone in early fall. So there's going to be a lot of coordination needed for that.
Okay, great.
Mike, I do have a question.
Yeah.
Matt, it just occurred to me, looking at number 5, 101 12th Street, remind me, is it 3 years from the time of approval before they have to do something and they have to request an extension? Because obviously that's an office building and they're in no hurry to do an office building now.
That's right. It is 3 years, by which point I believe a footing to grade permit needs to be issued by the county to allow that use permit to be vested and continue. I would have to check back to see if in the time since that was approved, if any other extensions were issued by the Commonwealth of Virginia. There have been 1 or 2 instances where I think there was a blanket extension given to everybody before and even after the pandemic or during the pandemic. So I can check back and confirm exactly what their current deadline might be.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Okay. Great. Matt, why don't we move into the Crystal Houses update just so we don't keep them hanging, and we can come back to the zoning.
Sure.
Okay.
I think I made everybody presenters from that team, so you guys should be able to share your screens, I think.
Great, welcome.
Thank you, and I'll get us started. My name is CEO of the Arlington Partnership Housing, and I'm joined by members of the team here tonight. I've got Mike Chiappa, if you want to wave, Mike. He's Senior Vice President of Real Estate at APA, who worked with me for the last decade. We also have Senior Project Manager Haley Norris and Danny Ross, Project Manager, who are both on this deal and will be presenting with me tonight. We also have our land use attorney, Nick Cummings from Washkaluchi, listening on the line, as well as Kevin Pennington from KGD Architecture. And obviously, to the degree you have questions from Arlington County's housing staff, we've got Ed Venezia on the line as well as Chris DeMatris. So with that, I'm going to keep my piece really short so we can dig into the project. But for those of you not familiar with APA, our mission, and it is actually recently updated. You're the first public group that has seen our vision. It's the first time APA's had one in our 35-year history, to my knowledge. Everyone deserves a place to call home, a foundation to live their dreams. At APA, we believe that housing is a human right, and that's what we are. That's the goal that we are trying to further in Arlington County. And our mission is to exist to provide affordable housing, coupled with resident-centered programming to help our residents make the most of their home. And we are a 50-person nonprofit based in Boston. I've lived in Arlington the last 27 years and worked at APA the last 13. We own 2,300 apartment homes. Most of them are in Arlington, and 20 properties in every corner of Arlington, except for Crystal City. So this is a really important project for us as we get a chance to really deepen our relationship in Arlington and in this one last area where we hadn't been able to make any inroads in finding land to do affordable housing. But we also are growing. We have 1,400 units in active pre-development. We went from just serving Arlington, and in 2017, our board adopted a strategic plan. So now we actually serve the greater DMV, and we are in 5 jurisdictions today. We are very committed to not only affordable housing, but also being partners in about 10% of our units are set aside for permanent supportive housing partnerships so that other nonprofits in Arlington can make referrals into our buildings. Out of our 50 employees, 18 of them are resident service professionals. That's navigators, folks with social work backgrounds that work in each of our buildings so that they can help folks navigate and be active in programs to not only make the most of their home, but also seek opportunities. So either workforce, economic mobility, health and wellness, both physical and mental. Half of our residents, we have over 4,300 residents, most of them in Arlington. Half of them are under the age of 25. So our children, youth, and family program is alive and well. Housing stability, that's keeping people housed. During the pandemic, we did an eviction moratorium that exceeded the federal and the statewide requirements, obviously, and kept people housed the entirety of the pandemic. So we are very committed to keeping people housed once they find our housing, as well as community building. Our residents, we have a resident council. Our residents are active in civic life, and I hope they would do so as well when they moved, when we open our first buildings in Crystal City and Pentagon City. We have a link there to an annual report that we issued about our social impact from a resident services group. We can send that around to the committee afterwards through that link. You'll read the full report there. And with that, I think my next slide I'm transitioning over to, and again, you'll get these stats in the materials we sent, but you know, it's an active week. We're having summer camp right now for our kids. They're going to the Washington National Zoo, King's Dominion. I forget where else they're going. We're doing swim camps at Longbridge. We really make sure that our kids take advantage of the amenities that all the other kids in Arlington get a chance to have access to. But our first project is actually a senior project, and it's our first senior project in Arlington. The demographics and the need for affordable housing dedicated to seniors is very important. In some of these other jurisdictions that we're doing work in, we started with doing senior housing in Loudoun, in Fairfax, and in DC, but this will be our first in Arlington. And we have a whole set of specific resident services that are geared for the over 62 and up population that you see here. And now, really with that, I pass it over to Haley. Oh, I'm lying. I don't. 2 examples. Gilliam Place is a representative project of ours on Columbia Pike. We redeveloped a PC, Arlington Presbyterian Church, into 170 units of affordable housing, 73 units of affordable housing, co-located with 2 groups. APC came back as a tenant on the base, but we also worked with La Cocina VA, now called Kitchen of Purpose, to create a kitchen incubator. And that opened during the pandemic and has launched many culinary entrepreneurs during the pandemic, and has a cafe and a training center. People are learning to be baristas and work in restaurants and bartending school, all of these things, ways for economic mobility, especially for, this was initially geared to the Latinx community, but now it's more broadly others. And then now Queens Court was also redevelopment of an APA-owned site. Believe it or not, this is just 1 acre of land. And we were able to go through a rezoning process, a change in the general land use plan, and change that 1 acre to be 249 units of housing, co-located with an Arlington County Public Park, which you see there, across the street from the new HB Woodlawn. And it was I think a 1.3 million square foot special GLUP study that was approved, that we were 250,000 square feet of affordable was part of that. Okay, Haley.
Right, thank you so much. I'm Haley Norris. I'm a senior project manager here at APA. I've been involved with the Crystal House project since the RFP stage. And I'm actually starting off my piece tonight with a quick introduction to our development partner for Crystal House, and that's EYA. Their team was not able to attend the meeting tonight, but we wanted to take this opportunity to introduce you to them and some of their work as well, since they're such a key team member here on this redevelopment. They are one of the region's most highly respected firms. They specialize in infill development with over 30 years of experience in complex mixed income developments as well, similar to this Crystal House redevelopment. APA and EYA also have an existing partnership in DC for a new development that recently broke ground on the affordable housing component. So we're excited to continue that partnership here into Arlington. So as you can see in this slide, EYA is really laser focused on the DC area and has 50 neighborhoods today that kind of fulfill their mission of life within walking distance. So the Crystal House community will also be furthering this mission as well, given its incredible transit-rich location. Here, this is just a small sampling of EYA's recent projects. As you can see, EYA's land planning and architecture are unique and specific to each site. None of them are cookie cutter, and they value and prioritize design that fits within the surrounding community context. This is the same approach they will bring to the Crystal House development and the buildings that they're working on there as well. So we wanted to take just a minute to remind everyone of some of the history of this Crystal House infill redevelopment, because it's been around for a little bit and is kind of coming back now here with us. So this project was initially entitled in December of 2019 by the previous property owner as a fully market rate infill redevelopment of those parking lots. Washington Housing Conservancy, or WHC, acquired the site in 2020. As a part of that acquisition, an Amazon affiliate acquired the rights to the entitled infill development, as Amazon was a part of that acquisition capital stack. So the Amazon affiliate then assigned those rights to the development to Arlington County, who released a highly competitive national RFP process for that infill redevelopment right in late 2021, I believe. So the RFP required the majority of these new units to, instead of market rate, be affordable, with a focus on expeditious delivery of these affordable homes and the community benefits that had been approved in the original 4.1. So here is, again, just as a refresher, the approved 4.1 site plan. So Crystal House 1 and 2 are there today and remain, and what surrounds it was approved for the infill redevelopment. So APA and EYA teamed up in late 2021 to submit a proposal for that competitive RFP, and our team was thrilled to be selected in late 2022. So as you can see here in this updated site plan that we've put together, our redevelopment and proposal really honors the approved 4.1 plans and the site layout overall. Some of the highlights of this proposed redevelopment include these 5 new buildings of various densities and types. The site is now going to be mixed tenancy with some rental units, some for sale units. It's going to be multi-generational. As Carmen mentioned, we're going to be developing our first senior building in Arlington. There will be family-oriented units. In total, the new development is going to be approximately 844 new units on the site, with at least 655 of them affordable, between 30% of the area median income up through 80% of the area median income. We'll be delivering the buildings in phases, which we'll talk through just kind of a high-level overview of that in just a second, because it is so much to develop across the whole site. So we'll be starting on the first one next year, delivering the last around 2030. Community benefits include streetscape improvements, green building features, and of course the 2 parks that you see here in the site plan and that were approved in the original 4.1. We'll also be providing in this redevelopment replacement parking, because we are building out the parking lots that the residents of Crystal House 1 and 2 currently use. So we'll be providing replacement parking largely in underground structured garages underneath the new buildings. So just a quick overview of the phasing and schedule, which are kind of subject to change as the development goes along. Crystal House 6, which we're here to discuss further tonight, is going to be a new affordable senior community. We just submitted a minor site plan amendment for this, and we anticipate breaking ground about a year from now in 2024, with delivery in 2026.
Could you show this with your cursor, because it's impossible to see?
Thank you so much. That's a great point. There you go. So that's Crystal House 6 there over on, so that's 18th Street. And then so we'll move south kind of down the site. And the next phases to go will be Crystal House 3, which is an affordable family-oriented building, as well as Crystal Houses 7 and 8 up along South Fern Street. So those should start construction around sometime in 2027, or sorry, those should start construction in 2025 and finish in 2027. And then Crystal House 4 and Crystal House 5, which is actually across the street there. We expect to start those in 2028 and finish sometime around 2030. So that's kind of how the overall construction phasing timeline will go. So our team is really excited for this opportunity to bring these new affordable homes to this amenity transit-rich neighborhood in Crystal City National Landing. And we look forward to continuing to share updates with this group and our other neighbors as the redevelopment progresses. But for tonight, I'm going to turn over to my colleague Danny Ross to walk through the updates to the Crystal House 6 building, because that's the first one to go.
Thank you, Haley and Carmen. I'm Danny Ross, project manager for APA, working specifically on Crystal House 6, as you can see here. Zooming into the first phase of this site, Crystal House 6, you can see our proposed building design rendered here. I'll come back to this slide later, but wanted to give you a preview of how the building might look entering from 18th Street, looking back at Crystal House 1, seen in the background. Along with our architecture team at KGD, we carefully studied the massing for the existing conditions, and working off the previously approved Crystal House 6 design, we looked for ways to improve the building's massing to make stronger connections between the streetscape and the proposed building. Crystal House 1, the existing building, is disconnected from the surrounding street grid in a more suburban high-density housing solution. The new building, Crystal House 6, will anchor the site to the streetscape with facade treatments that help to carry that connection through to the existing building. This massing exercise in the slide here helps to illustrate the importance of the front corner previously illustrated on the rendering. The overall design of the building was considered on all sides, as the project will be closely connected to the surrounding community with pedestrian and vehicular connections. The building's programming and design has been carefully updated to provide an enhanced living experience for affordable senior housing in 80 units. This includes both private and shared outdoor spaces, as well as amenity spaces needed to support the future senior residents of the building. Additionally, the project is designed to reach Earthcraft Gold certification. Back to the rendering, you can see the building's main entrance off 18th Street with our primary shared outdoor space. This large front porch offers seniors an area off the lobby to meet guests or watch as people come and go through this gateway into the site. Additional outdoor space provides a calmer place to spend time outside on the opposite side of the building at the back porch. The building's materials selected are meant to enhance the building design, shape, look, and feel. The protruding corner has a reflective metal paneling that has various shades of blue, which will be slightly reflective, similar to a shimmering crystal. Fiber cement panels, brick, and window glazing make up the remainder of the building's facade. The colors were selected to be complementary and fit in the surrounding context without being a direct reflection of the muted gray palette of the older buildings. So from the development team, I would like to thank everyone for your time and open it up to questions. You can also email us with any additional questions or concerns if we don't get to you or you think of something later. As Carmen mentioned, we also have our architect from KGD, Kevin Pennington, is on the call, as well as Chris and Ann from the County Housing Department. We'd also be happy to present our project should others wish us to attend any other meetings and as we share our progress. And we're also in the planning process to meet with residents and local businesses very soon. So with that, I'll take any questions or comments. And might be the easiest is just to raise your hand in the Teams, and I will. Looks like we've already got some hands up. Carol.
Right. Could you explain what Earthcraft Gold is compared to LEEDs?
Sure. Haley, do you want to take that? I think you're more familiar with Earthcraft Gold.
I would actually love to bounce that to our architect if you can take that one. Either Kevin or Nick, if one of you guys could cover that.
Sure. Yeah, Earthcraft, it's very similar to Lead Goal in terms of its intent. It's just a different path to compliance. And as far as the specifics of it, it's based on a point system, very similar to Lead Gold, and it goes through various elements of the design that we'll have to make decisions on how we want to achieve those points in terms of the energy efficiency and building mechanical systems, the materials that we use, and so forth. But just for all intents and purposes, it's very similar to a Lead Gold in terms of its intent.
Thanks, Kevin. Pamela.
Yeah, I have two questions. The first question, since you're up here, is the senior housing you're providing, and this is basically just apartments for older citizens. It's not independent living, it's not assisted living, it's not memory care. You're not providing any kind of other services. This is just housing.
Yes, so it is affordable housing for seniors. In addition, we do have, as Carmen mentioned, our robust resident services program. And then they also partner with various other people in the community to provide any additional service and benefit. There's also a set aside for 10% of the units to be permanent supportive housing.
What does that mean?
So
Permanent, yeah. Permanent supportive housing is what?
yeah, so permanent supportive housing would be for a much lower area median income. And these folks also have usually additional needs that, we would generally partner with someone to focus in on what their needs are and what needs to be provided in terms of their care.
Okay.
And here in Arlington, we're partnering with Arlington County. They have a program for permanent supportive housing. They provide services. They work with the residents who move in for those specific units. But it is independent, affordable senior living, not assisted.
Right. Yeah, I just participated in the Sunrise on Glebe, and it was assisted in memory care, and it's like, well, it's a totally different world. So just
totally different.
Yeah. My other question, I guess, is for Haley. If you can bring up the overall sketch of all the buildings, and what came out with the approval of the first 4.1 was how to provide pedestrian access through the site. And it was never resolved how you would get out of the corner at 18th and Eads. And I noticed there's a little notch over on Eads. Is that an access point? Kind of in the mid-block?
Yeah, I can speak to the previous approval. This is Nick Cummings, because obviously I was the attorney who was primarily working on that as well.
Yeah.
We're not at the point yet where we're submitting a minor amendment to do any sort of redesign work on Crystal House 3. There was not that sort of access provided with the previous approval, but we would be taking a look at all of this again. I think the primary conduit for increasing permeability on this large block was the cut through on the site, which you can see on this plan if you look right where it's labeled South 8th Street. There is a tree-lined pathway that we worked hard with the community and with staff to design that runs through the entire site up to South Fern Street, where there's an entrance that's sort of announced by some landscaping and plaza-esque treatment up there. That's an important feature that's going to be maintained no matter what happens with the potential amendments and tweaks to all of these different structures.
Yeah, that's kind of basically what we had before. And that does not match the desire line for pedestrians going through the area. It's more the X going the other way. And because the metro is so close to 18th, just a block away. A million people go through the corner of Eads and 18th, and it's really important that somehow they have access. So something to think about. And what I remember from a few years ago was that this detail was supposed to go to the pedestrian advisory committee, and it never went to us. So that would be nice. Thank you. Great project.
Thanks, Pamela. Susan?
Yes, my question is, it's looking at the current phasing, I'm sort of wondering how this, since Crystal House 6 was one of the earliest ones on 18th, how that fits with redevelopment on the Crystal Towers block just to the north on the other side of 18th. I mean, I know the majority of the work on Crystal Towers 3 is going to be coming off of Eads, but there's still a lot of stuff going in and out the entrances on 18th Street. So I just wanted to talk about the coordination on that, or get your thoughts on that.
You know, I can speak briefly first. I mean, it'll just kind of depend on when both projects actually move forward to construction. I think our timeline is pretty quick, and I'm not sure what the timeline is on Crystal Towers. I was the attorney on that, and Robert obviously is a member of this, so he can speak to you about it in more detail. But when and if there is construction work on both sites, I think what's important is that the county is reviewing plans like the MOT, you know, the circulation, the hauling route, pedestrian safety and routes, you know, around both sites. Certainly, I think that the county feels like they did a decent job in Boston, for example, when there were just a ton of buildings under construction. So I'm sure they can handle this one, and then we would work closely with everybody, including our neighbor.
Yeah, and also we're you know, fairly early on in the design of the building. So we'll go through you know, selecting a general contractor and working out a lot of these construction details in the coming months. But thank you for your question. Michael?
Yes, thanks. And thank you for coming this evening. I had a couple of questions. First one is for Matt Matusik. I guess how do we decide, or how's the county decide if it's a minor site plan amendment versus let's go back and have the community look at this again? Should I give you a minute to think about that? And I got a couple more. So
No, I'm good. There's specific criteria that are listed in the zoning ordinance,
okay,
which ultimately the zoning administrator needs to consider with staff. And typically there are thresholds like a specific change in the overall density that's proposed, or the use itself. Sometimes there may be a number of smaller, excuse me, elements that collectively, because there might be so many, I think in the determination of the zoning administrator, qualify and a more substantial change, and therefore we decide to go with the major use permit amendment path. So it all depends on how these are packaged and the assessment that takes place on our side and the input we're going to get from the zoning administrator.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so I also with Pam think that as you guys pointed out, you know, community is really interested in the porosity through that site, and just some bigger context, you know, from 15th Street to 22nd Street, we only have 3 through roads. So you're in a very non-porous part of our neighborhood, and it's really problematic. So the 20th Street, you're preserving that's great, but you know, that's been there. 20th Street is actually like in terms of getting across Route 1, is the least useful street because you can't really get across Route 1 on 20th. But so really emphasize how important that accessing that corner on 18th Street is. So if you can keep that in mind, as Pam suggested, that'd be great. The last question I had, since this is you're talking about folks who were really interested in families, seniors. When you look at this area, do you see any gaps in services where you say, wow, the park's a little far away, the school's far away, the access to Metro isn't great, the supermarket's a long walk. How do you break that down? Is there anything where you feel like the level of services you'd ideally have for this community is not quite where you'd like it to be yet? That'd be very helpful to know.
I'm
That's a
happy
great
to kind
question.
of jump in. I mean, candidly, Crystal City is an incredible area of opportunity, and one, we feel fits really most of our projects in Arlington, could say that. But we do look at gaps, and that's, there's some of the MOUs you bring in. Like right now, we're starting the food pantry at our headquarter building, the Springs, where our offices are located. Because even though we had APAC once a week, we felt it wasn't enough, and it was a little too long a walk for our residents. So, in the next 60 days, people will be able to be basically a free store 40 hours a week where people can walk in and get what they need. So we are always canvassing, and if it's a health clinic that we're missing, we work up with an MOU, and if we have community room, we'll set up a relationship with a healthcare provider to provide clinics on site 1 day a week. So all of our buildings have flexible community space. So as we do our intake services, we design based on who moves in, what their needs are.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the reason I asked is what this council does is keep track of the amenities and essential services that are needed for the area. So if you have any input on, services that you see are not quite where you'd like them to be for this community, we'd be interested in understanding what that is.
Well, we would love to participate, even be a fly on the wall for some of those meetings. And we have our head of resident services, our vice president is the person who creates kind of the vision and the mapping of where the gaps are. If you wouldn't mind inviting him to one of your meetings, he could already start being in listen mode and maybe give you some of the data that he's looking at in terms of making those decisions.
Okay, great. That'd be helpful.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
All right, thanks, Michael. Ajden?
Yes, thank you. It's actually Ideen. I know it's weird.
Sorry
I
about
wasn't
that.
born in this country and we didn't have a Y. So, yeah, I have a question about from a transportation aspect, kind of the only thing I was able to find in terms of details on this project was the board report from 2021. And I was wondering how relevant that is. It says that there were like 825 parking spaces currently slated for the development as a whole, and whether that's accurate or if that's subject to change.
Absolutely subject to change. I think with each one of these minor amendments that will examine, each one of the buildings as we look at the design and then go to get financing and get them built. We're going to look at the parking supply, and the parking supply was originally entitled about a 0.7 site-wide, and the original developer was obviously a market rate normal developer who was looking to provide enough parking that they felt they needed for leasing. And so when planning a community that's going to have a substantial amount of affordable housing, parking needs are probably different. And so we're looking at right sizing that with each application.
How are the parking needs? So this is the first kind of like affordable housing project that I work on. How did the parking needs differ from a regular market rate? Generally
It's a great question
speaking.
for Haley, for Danny, for Carmen. Go ahead, guys.
I can take the first try at this one, but they tend to be lower, particularly in areas like this where you do have a lot of amenities close by. You have transit, you have Metro right across the street. Some of our recent Arlington County deals, communities that we've built in metro areas are more like a 0.5 and 0.4 parking ratio. Those are in the Roslyn area, the Virginia Square area. So we would expect to reduce that 0.7 here as well because of that precedent.
All right. Yeah, wonderful. Because I saw that 825 parking spaces and 844 new units almost a 0.1 ratio. I know you said counting in the existing buildings, it'd be 0.7, but we have the experience of the Bartlett down the road of being one a parking ratio of almost 1, and they found out it was JBG Smith found out it was way too big, and they're moving it to a 0.7, and I think time will show that even that's too much. So it'd be great if well, you know, as these individual buildings, I'm assuming will be moving through the various committees to work on lowering that number. And also, I didn't see anything about in the board report or the board document, whatever the technical name for it is, from 2021 about bicycle parking or facilities within these buildings. So I'm assuming those will be clarified down the road as well.
There were bike rooms in each building. We did provide bicycle parking. And then again, I think as each building is assessed as we go through it, and Kevin or Haley or Danny could speak to bicycle parking here, which I think is a little bit different for this target, community. But absolutely, there was bike parking, and we'll continue to look at them at each building.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara? Barbara there?
Barbara, you're muted.
Barbara, you're on mute.
Sorry. Sorry. So I'm wondering whether with COVID and with the increasing pollution of the air here, we have some of the worst pollution in the area. Whether you are looking, particularly when you have senior citizens, for ventilation of the buildings. It seems to me this is something that people haven't looked at as seriously as they should have.
Yes, thank you. We definitely will pay close attention to the incoming air for ventilation systems, make sure we have the highest quality air for our seniors. That is certainly something that we will be considering as we design the building with greater detail. I don't know if anybody else on the team has more to add to that, but
I could probably add something to that. This building is designed with it's being designed with a DOAS system, which is a large, reasonably large piece of equipment on the roof that will filter all incoming air into the building, and the system works that it pushes the clean air into each one of the units, and they will have high performing SEER mechanical system within the units, and it's part of the Earthcraft Gold strategy is to you get the points for higher performing systems, and that's one of the points that we've been looking to utilize. That one seems we seem pretty confident on that one.
Thanks, Kevin. All right. I think we're down to our last question from Carol.
Right, thank you. I'm delighted to see the 80 units for seniors. It's something the community has been pushing for years, especially with the River House project. So I'm glad to see that. But I have a two-part coordination question, very quick. I just got an email today from Arlington Thrive that said that the sheriff's deputies have issued 227 eviction notices since the beginning of the year. And I just wondered about whether there's coordination that goes on between organizations like Arlington Thrive and what you're doing in APA. I guess this is a Carmen question. And the second part of that is, what kind of a waiting list do you have for your units throughout Arlington?
Yes, there is deep coordination between APA and Thrive specifically, as well as other groups, because we need to, and have been for years now, coupling residents who need assistance paying the rent with either federal, state, or local resources. And Thrive has an allocation of additional resources. So we, these navigators, that 18-person team of navigators work
and our peers and other nonprofits do the same, where we really try to help people find resources so that they can stay housed. And that has really been at the heart of our work for really the last 3 years. The reality, though, is the federal tools and the state tools have dried up. And then the local ability to continue with the magnitude of the need is really a problem, not only locally, really nationally. This trend around, the eviction courts after 3 years of keeping people housed, and now not enough money to help people recover fully from COVID who maybe lost their job or their hours went down, or they can really no longer, pay the rent on their own for whatever reason, is a public policy and a really humanitarian problem that I think all of us in safety net, APA, nonprofits, Thrive, as well as the county are really working hard to try to be creative, but it is a difficult time kind of nationally with this problem.
And your waiting list?
Waiting lists, typically when we open up a building in Arlington, 160 units, we may get thousands of people showing up on the interest list, and we have wait lists almost everywhere. But every property has its own wait list.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, everyone. I've stopped sharing, so I guess we'll turn it back over.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I do think, and Pam Van Honey and Ben, maybe the Aurora Highlands Civic Association may want to follow up. That's the association right on the, right to the west of the facility. Yeah. So, okay.
Danny meant it earlier when he said that, any other groups, anybody here who wants to come back to a full group, I recognize it's kind of a leadership council almost, but we're happy to come out and speak to your full membership whenever you'd like.
Yeah. Yeah, this is right on the border of Aurora Highlands Civic Association in Crystal City. And almost everybody in this group was involved with the prior 4.1, and we all care deeply about what happens. So yes, we will definitely want to be involved as things go forward. Thank you.
I remember and know all of you, but I also very fondly remember the level of interest.
That's good. It's still there.
We might be interested in your speaking to the Crystal City Civic Association in September. That's our next meeting isn't until then.
Right, great. Well, thank you. Okay, Matt, let's go back to the let's go to the zoning amendment. Maybe you could walk through, or not the zoning, the clarification, and perhaps we could walk through it with the group.
Thank you all.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody. My presentation. There we go. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
All right. So this is actually a pretty interesting update from, I think, what we shared at the zoning committee of the Planning Commission a couple months ago now. So I want to make sure we have a really good understanding of, I think, what this is now, because the scope of study has grown a little bit since then. And what I wanted to do, I think, maybe in the interest of time, is really start with Pentagon City, which is kind of what started it, this entire assessment, and then explain how that has grown to more of a county-wide assessment, leading to our proposed amendment. So beginning with the Pentagon City Sector Plan, the document itself, along with several changes to the General Land Use Plan, the Zoning Ordinance, and the Master Transportation Plan, took place in February of 2022. At that time, we've acknowledged that Pentagon City, at least the study area that we were contemplating, was generally comprised of two primary zoning districts, CO 2.5 and on the western edge, RA 615, everything west of Joy Street. And what we wanted to do is be very strategic, such that when applicants were ready to utilize the sector plan, they didn't have to go through the rezoning process So we looked into those two zoning districts and make sure that there was specific site eligibility standards included. So you knew that if you have this zoning district and you are within the planning boundaries of the Pentagon City District, you can opt into and follow the Pentagon City Sector Plan with your redevelopment. And a special section in the zoning ordinance 9.6, as you can see here, was established to kind of formalize that relationship and make sure that there was a common understanding of what the sector plan was trying to achieve, what the implications were of development, and what the county board would have to consider when making their findings.
I think we're on the wrong slide. These are your these are your slides from the. Is this the right slide?
Yeah, are you not seeing the
Oh,
zoning
okay.
map for Pentagon City?
No.
I'm seeing them. So maybe there's just some weird lag. Yeah.
Yeah, I see the zoning.
Okay.
I see it.
I see it.
All right. I guess we're good there. Hopefully it catches up for you, Pam. Not sure why it's doing that. So what I really wanted to focus is really on the western edge of the Pentagon City District. This is the portion that's zoned RA 615. And what we started to notice was that the Pentagon City Sector Plan in that area had very specific guidance in terms of building heights. And the closer you got to the western and even southern boundaries, the height needed to come down to create more suitable transitions to the lower density residential neighborhoods that are on that edge of the district. But even then, with those transitions, there were opportunities to either meet the existing building heights that are currently on that site, or to even exceed them as you got closer towards Army Navy Drive and Joy Street. So when we started to look at those permitted building heights in the sector plan, and we started to see that some of these applications that are beginning to come in may include a building that houses elder care uses, we started to zoom into RA 615 zoning district because it has a very specific clause that under no circumstances buildings that have elder care uses cannot exceed 70 feet. And because of various interpretations that I think were provided, what this is really establishing is a very, I think, conservative technical amendment to clarify the ambiguity or inconsistency in terms of that guidance. We want to make sure that what you'll see throughout the presentation is that the 70 feet first represents what you can otherwise do with a multifamily building in that zoning district. So it's not unnecessarily depressing heights for elder care uses. It's treating them like all the other uses can be treated in that zoning district. But most importantly, clarifying that that restriction is still appropriate in areas that are not otherwise planned for a special planning district. So like by right development or site plans perhaps that are outside of any planning boundary. But in the instances where you have RH 615 zoning, and you're also part of a geography or boundary that has had some planning guidance, like Pentagon City, for example, the heights should actually be permitted to go higher because we have more updated and current guidance that the county board has expressed. So that really started, to think about, what happens in Pentagon City. But as you're going to see in a minute, those issues are not limited to just Pentagon City. The other item that has a similar issue between the two different guidance that we have comes to uses, particularly uses that may occupy the ground floor of mixed-use buildings. So here you can see the retail map that was part of the Pentagon City Sector Plan, and along Joy Street, specifically where the arrow is, there's a lot of kind of concentrated retail that's kind of working between both sides of Joy Street. And that opens the door to pretty much all kind of retail and commercial uses that you can see in other projects like this, and that are typically envisioned in a mixed-use environment. What happens is, and again, just focusing on that western edge of the sector plan, when we look at RA 615, that district directs you to look at a use table that governs all RA zoning districts. And in that case, very popular and common use categories like food establishments, retail sales, retail repair, they're not permitted. They're actually prohibited. So this was one of the other clarifying points we wanted to make, that if there's this overlap between RA 615 zone properties that also fall within planning boundaries of a larger process that resulted in an area plan or a sector plan, that area and sector plan should provide the most current guidance in terms of what's permitted. But as you can see here, those empty boxes in the use table, which indicate, the use is prohibited, are not limited to just RA 615 zoning district. They're actually across the board in all the RA zoning districts. So what we did next is take a look at, from a countywide perspective, where else is this happening? Because maybe we have an opportunity to kind of make a bigger correction here. And as we looked at those other zoning districts, you can see here those very four typical and popular use categories are prohibited. So what we then started to do is assess where throughout the county those districts exist, and where do you also have the convergence of other planning guidance that the county board has adopted previously that maybe opens the door to something else, a broader use mix that redevelopment can deliver. And through that work, we identified 4 other planning areas that have a special note and a boundary on the general land use plan. And those primarily involve the 2 districts along Columbia Pike, the commercial form-based code and the neighborhoods form-based code. But they also involve the Fort Myer Heights North Special District and also the Green Valley, formerly NOC, Village Center District with GLUP Note 21. So basically, in all these instances, those guiding documents actually express either taller building heights, regardless of use, or a broader list of uses that are permitted on the ground floor. So I'm just going to run through real quick what those are. We don't need to spend too much time on them. I've actually posted this on the CPCC website if anybody wants to really dive in. But you can see here, starting with Fort Myer Heights, pretty significant heights above 70 feet that are already permitted and not restricted to elder care or other uses, as well as the use mix that's already in the ordinance for that district. Similarly, Green Valley, south of 24th Street, I believe, has heights that can easily surpass 70 feet. And depending on the RA zoning district, that maximum height for elder care might vary. It could be 60, 65. One category actually has 95. And then finally, on Columbia Pike, we have the commercial code, which in most 6-story configurations allows heights up to 96 feet if every floor was maximized. And even in exchange for historic preservation, that height could be exceeded. And then finally, in the neighborhoods form-based code, also on that district, on that corridor, there are heights that easily surpass 70 feet with new buildings reaching 12 to 14-story height limits in key areas. And again, in each case, we are documenting the use mix that's permitted, which is typically broader than the one that that use table allows in section 6.1 of the ordinance. So in summary, you can see here that we are not just dealing and trying to correct a Pentagon City issue. This is more of a broader analysis of the county between all 4 RA zoning districts and 5 special planning areas that have more explicit guidance in terms of what development could look like. So with our amendment, what we're trying to do is target all those instances. So you're going to see when the staff report comes out, I believe next week, amendments to all 4 of the RA zoning districts, targeting the permitted uses, and also introducing exceptions to the height standards for elder care when areas are within previous planning districts, and then also providing some clarifying language in the section 9.6, which is established to help implement the Pentagon City sector plan. So we are proceeding to request to advertise in mid-July, and we will come back in September to complete those changes with the Planning Commission and County Board discussion. With that, happy to answer questions. All right, woo, a bunch just went up. I think Jeff was quickest to his clicker.
Hey, Matt, I happened to watch your presentation to the zoning committee when this came up, and I was at the Arca Civic Association meeting the next day, and I happened to mention that this was going to come up, and we would get briefed on it at this meeting. And the question came up about the 70-foot limit on senior. And some people speculated that it had to do with the ability for people to safely get out of the building, or kind of evacuation, or emergency. Do we know why the 70-foot limit got put on that?
Yeah, I don't think it was more of a egress issue. I'm going to go back to this slide. In 2019, there were 2 phases of zoning ordinance amendments targeting elder care uses that were completed. I think one in September and one in December. And in each case, there was a very mindful effort to introduce this use, which was, I think, previously prohibited or very difficult to achieve, throughout the zoning ordinance. So there were, I think, 16 or 18 different zoning districts that included kind of a patchwork of amendments, first introducing the use and then providing very specific standards on how it should be regulated. But because it was so new, and because I think folks were very concerned about what this might open the door to, staff at the time kind of went out of its way to provide a cheat sheet, if you will, in terms of what's currently permitted, let's say for multifamily buildings in each of these 4 zoning districts, and essentially carry that number and apply it to elder care uses. So if you were to redevelop a multifamily building, particularly one that allows low and moderate income housing, you're allowed to go as high as these heights are right here, between 60 and 95 feet, depending on the zoning district. And I think what that accomplishes is that in each of these cases, the zoning districts are located in areas that sometimes may be surrounded by more dense, more denser buildings. And in some cases, they're more of a transitional district where you have very low density residential neighborhoods adjacent to it. So we're trying to be very careful in terms of not introducing a use with a sky's the limit approach, because we really want to see these projects come in, but really be consistent with what's already permitted in each zoning district. And on that topic, because I may have missed that point earlier, these rules actually make a lot of sense if we're dealing with by right development or outside of any previously planned areas. So we're not saying that they have to change. It's just we need to introduce exceptions for the instances when one of those 5 planning areas are involved. Mike, I think you're next.
Oh yeah, thanks, Matt. Yeah, I did want to follow up on that. It still seems like it would be worth understanding why did the elder care height get established in the first place? Because I just did a quick search on the internet, and so it does appear in a place, Hong Kong, for instance, they have a height limit of 24 meters for their elder care, and they say many elderly residents are wheelchair bound and bedridden. In event of fire or other emergencies, they need extensive assistance to escape, difficulty evacuating from heights, and basically that's why they have the height restriction in Hong Kong. So I guess I'm feeling like there's probably, like Jeff said, there's probably the similar concern here once upon a time, and I'd certainly be willing to think that fire, evacuation technology has caught up, but it feels like we need to figure out why that is rather than just, relieve the height requirement.
Yeah, I think some of it gets into our ability or inability to kind of predict and get ahead of market conditions, where I think there's a natural interest to try to structure these regulations to get ahead and match what we think elder care providers might want to deliver, or what is their most economically feasible product. And I think rather than trying to do that, relying more on the building code and other aspects that still apply, or the fire code, and simply indicate that in some parts of the county, and there's only a handful, right? Greater heights actually can be permitted as long as you can meet all the other kind of safety precautions that we have in place. I don't think the height restrictions in the zoning ordinance are the only mechanism by which I think we can accomplish and make sure that there's that safety element uh, provided, because I think those projects would still not get approved or be issued their certificate of occupancy. But it's something we can definitely revisit, and I suspect maybe in some of the discussions that took place back in 2019, that might reveal itself as well. So I can certainly follow up.
Yeah, it'd be interesting what the fire department thinks. Can they, can they get those people out when they're at that height? All right, thanks.
Pam, I think you're next.
Okay, thank you. Still staying on elder housing. My sense after participating in the Sunrise is the limitations on the housing height and structure depends upon the services that the building is offering. And if it's just basically apartments for older people, it should basically be the same as for any other population. But once you start having assisted living, independent living, memory care, it gets a lot more complicated, and you really are concerned about people with disabilities of all different kinds and getting them out of the building. So I think it's something that we needs more thought about how the county is going to be thinking about this and what kind of regulations we want to set up, because I think there's a huge need out there, and there's going to be all kinds of senior housing coming down the pike that's really important. So um, Sunrise, FYI, is about a 60-foot thing. It's 4 floors. One floor is entirely memory care, and 2 floors are assisted living. And it looks like for Crystal House, it looks like it was 6 stories maybe for the senior facility. But that, again, that is just like apartments. So I think there's going to be a variation in heights and limits, and it is going to depend upon the population and services being offered in each building.
Yeah, and I know the Sunrise examples on Glebe Road, I think, are currently proposed in areas that were not previously planned. So there's, I think, the natural element of, even if they wanted to pursue taller heights, they simply are not able to. Or at least they might become very expensive because of the bonus density they would need to earn.
Yeah,
But
I think given their experience, and Sunrise has, a huge number of these buildings, in their experience, that was the height that and floors that worked for what the population they wanted to serve at this site.
yeah, and we can certainly follow up with some of the other protections and controls that I think apply when other agency beyond just, staff reviewing the zoning ordinance, I think need to be involved. So I can certainly get some of those answers in terms of who determines that, and depending on the broad spectrum of what it means to be elder care, right? And the more increased service levels of, more towards assisted living versus just independent living.
Yeah, and do we know what River House wants to do?
Not yet. I think senior housing / elder care were the consistent use categories that we continue to see for one of the multiple buildings that are being proposed.
Matt, this is Jeff. I just want to do one follow-up. I very much support removing the height restriction, particularly the additional floors means additional supply of senior housing. And if independent living people can live on the higher floors, if the lower floors is for kind of concerns about evacuation or getting disabled residents down, they may be able to solve it that way. But I would hate to see basically a 7-story building be pushed down to 5 or 4 and lose all of that additional possible senior housing. So that's just where I'm coming from.
Gotcha. Let's see, Susan, and then Rich.
Thanks. I'll just say I agree with Jeffrey that the demographics point to a big need for apartments for older residents who aren't necessarily, specifically impaired, although that kind of happens as you go along, and then you have to make different choices as you get older. But we're short on that kind of housing. We need more of it. So I don't think it should be. I don't think the height should be pushed down. I think it should be allowed to be whatever is reasonable within the envelope and within the context of all the other stuff that's going on the property. And I'll just jump to the retail part of it, which is to say, I love the idea of having more flexibility on the kinds of the other kinds of things that can go in those areas. So
Great. Appreciate that feedback. Rich?
Matt, there may be a good example to look at in Tyson's with regard to independent living, assisted living, and memory care. There's a company called Mather that's recently built a high-rise facility, and I think it's opening in 2024 or the end of this year. Right downtown Tyson's is definitely a high-rise concrete structure. And we've spoken to the company recently about some other locations. So they're actually looking at other locations in DC and I think Maryland and Virginia for, again, all they do is really high rise, and it's a for sale. Again, independent living, assisted living, and memory care all within one tower. So again, maybe just a good example to talk about maybe with some Fairfax County building official or fire officials, how they solved the problems there. So.
Gotcha. No, that's very helpful. All right. Aiden?
Yes, there we go. Let me turn my camera on. Yes, I wanted to talk about the Mather example as well, because that is, I just looked it up right now, 27 stories, and it combines a lot of those facilities. And there is another example, I mean, in a different state, not really known for its regulations, but Florida, there is a new facility in Fort Lauderdale that is 42 stories that includes a lot of assisted living, memory care, and then just regular retirement homes. So I agree with I believe it was Jeff who said that we, is more for deregulation to take advantage of some of these opportunities, because a lot of our population is going to be is aging, and I'd like for my neighbors to stay in Arlington and not have to move out as they downsize from their homes or whatever. So I hope we can find a regulatory plan that accommodates that. Thank you.
I appreciate the examples. Very helpful. Anyone else? Not seeing any hands up.
All right, great. Thanks, Matt. So this is coming for advertisement in July?
In July, so that we can come back in September. So I imagine as that report gets drafted, we'll probably follow up with some further information about safety, egress, and maybe even mentioning some of these examples to kind of paint a full picture of what's involved in the different agencies that represent the review process for this very important use that we want to make sure can thrive in Arlington.
Great. Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Okay, well, let's move to the next item on the agenda, and this is so we're going to follow up. We had a discussion at the last meeting about some construction staging related issues that we're starting to see around Crystal City with all the construction going on, and trying to get some clarification on how that was managed. And I think we came down to at the last meeting that there were several areas of kind of jurisdiction, so to speak. There was the kind of the ground level monitoring of temporary roads and sidewalks, pedestrian ways, and so forth. And then there was then there were some aspects of the during construction lighting and other aspects that were really within the realm of the construction contractors and what they had to do to meet their insurance regulations and other safety related concerns. So tonight we've got an inspector from the county who's available to talk to us about how that first category, construction staging, is managed and approached. Matt, would you like to introduce Aaron, and we can get his professional opinion on some things?
Yeah, happy to do it. Aaron's been with the county for quite some time, maybe even as long as I've been with the county. I'm not sure. But he's seen a lot of different projects throughout the county, and I think has had some history with having frank discussions with folks about, what that involves and, the coordination that's needed. And a lot of the problem solving that I think just comes with the territory. So we figured with the makeup of this group, developers, residents, business owners, and I think, what we bring to the table from the county perspective, we could probably have a pretty helpful conversation and see what we can do in addressing any things that may have come up with some of the recent development activity, as additional projects are going to be coming online as well. So with that, welcome, Aaron.
Good evening, Matt, and thank you all for inviting me here tonight. My name is Aaron Shura, and I'm a zoning inspector with Arlington County. I've been employed with the county for 12 years. For the past 10 years, I've done site plan condition inspections related to site plan development in Crystal City, National Landing, and Pentagon City. I've worked on various projects such as the Sage at National Landing, also known as the Verizon site, the Pentagon Center redevelopment plan, that's the Costco garage, the Whitmere, and the Milton, as well as the Pentagon City addition. Currently, I'm working on the sites at 1900 Crystal Drive. As you all may know, this project is 1900 Crystal Drive, is a mixed-use development at National Landing, consisting of 2 residential buildings with core and shell retail spaces and 2 levels of below-grade parking. The 26-story north building features 337 units and 21,800 square feet of retail space. The 27-story south building has 471 units and 16,800 square feet of retail space. And Clark Construction, that's the contractor, demolished an existing 13-story office building and relocated utilities that serve surrounding buildings. Site work includes a new alley over the parking garage, sidewalks around both buildings, feature stairs between the plaza and the retail area, and the landscaping and stonework. And another site that I'm also working on, just because it's in your area, is 2001 South Clark Street. There are 2 multifamily residential buildings being constructed with ground floor retail. The west tower closest to Richmond Highway will bring in 338 dwelling units, over 12,000 square feet of retail, and about 250 feet in height. The east tower, currently up to the 13th floor as of a few weeks ago, will have about 420 units, 10,000 square feet of retail, and 200 feet in height. Balfour Beatty is providing over 300 parking spaces, and South Bell Street will be extended as well. And I'm involved with the site plan process from start to finish. I attend meetings during pre-condition, pre-construction, pre-shell and core, as well as post-occupancy. I interact with developers, contractors, subcontractors, citizens, and civic associations as the situation warrants. I conduct progress checks on my sites anywhere from once a week to every workday, depending on how close the project is to completion. For example, if it's just at the excavating, sheeting, and shoring phase, I might go out once every week. But if it's close to shell and core and getting ready for certificate of occupancy, I'll be out there every day. And when I receive a complaint, I investigate the complaint to see if it's valid. I'll bring it to the developer or the general contractor to inform them of the violation, explain why it's a violation. That's usually done by citing the site plan condition, and give them time to correct it. Some common complaints that I encounter is construction staging, street closures, contractor parking, and hours of construction. And construction staging is when I may find a vehicle that is staging in the wrong area. I investigate this by researching the construction staging plan to see if the vehicles are present at a location that is not in accordance with the construction staging plan. If I find that it's not, I'll obtain photos, as mentioned before, and then bring it to the contractor's attention. And usually it's been my experience that a contractor is pretty receptive and wants to be a good neighbor. And I emphasize usually, But if it keeps happening again and again, that's when we start the enforcement process, which I can provide to you if you have questions about that. Another common complaint I get is street closures, and those are handled by the Department of Environmental Services. There are transportation plans in the site plan process that need to meet DES's approval before a project starts. If there is an unforeseen event that requires a street to be closed, that goes through the Department of Environmental Services Transportation Division as well. And my main contact with that is Jerome Miller with the Department of Environmental Services. Construction worker parking is another common complaint that I receive. Prior to a project starting, a contractor working parking plan is required as per the site plan or use permit condition. And a challenge that I always encounter is who owns the car. I had a site plan here in Arlington about 5 years ago where residents were in a neighborhood were complaining about construction worker parking. And I found this to be valid when I went to the site around starting time and finishing time, and I witnessed workers getting out of their cars, putting on reflective vests or their boots or hard hats, and then walking into the site. And one complainant even sent me photos of the worker making aggressive gestures towards the complainant. And the first couple times I brought this up to the contractor attention to try to get some voluntary compliance, but it kept happening. And that's when I had to start the enforcement process. And this is a case where there was a public meeting where the citizens, the civic association, a state senator's representative, and a moderator were called in to address the issues. And just me, I just explained the enforcement process from start to finish. And hours of construction is another common complaint that I get. Before a site plan is approved, conditions are put in place where the contractor cannot do work before a specific time. Now, this time will vary on work days, weekends, and holidays. If I see a violation occurring, I'll bring it to the contractor's attention in an effort for them to voluntarily correct it. And I also have the option of coordinating with Arlington County Police for them to witness it and provide me with a report for my enforcement actions. And I can also forward noise complaints to them if it occurs outside of working hours. And the main goal of my job is compliance with the zoning ordinance and site plan conditions. If I can get compliance without violation notices, issuing tickets, and summoning someone to court, that's great. And it allows me to build a positive rapport with a property owner, contractor, and a developer without being viewed as an adversarial government agency. Any questions on all that?
That sounds like a lot, Aaron. I'm really, you addressed most of my questions over the course of your discussion. I think there's a couple of questions out there, so why don't we start with that? I wasn't noting, but Pam, do you want to pick up first, and then we'll go to Carol?
Yes, thank you, Aaron, for your presentation. I'm not familiar with this, so it's good to know you. You said that street closures are DES. Are bike lane closures and sidewalk closures also DES, or are any of those yours?
No, the bike lane closures, those would also be DES as well. If it's anything that's on the street, like a sidewalk closure, a bike lane closure, or a street closure, that's all Jerome Miller with DES.
Okay, thank you. That's what I thought.
Great, Carol?
Yeah, thank you, Aaron, for the presentation. In the Civic Association, we get the out of hours noise as the most common complaint. And usually I send them to the developer or the contractor. But if they want to come to you, what is your contact information? Is there a phone number that we should be publishing?
Yeah, I can, I'll put my name and contact number and email in the chat right now.
And do you recommend that? Is that to give you a call or to email you, or?
If it's usually email would work best. That's the way I have a written record. But you can also call me as well. I'll respond to the phone as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And Aaron, as a clarification, are you suggesting that because you're the zoning inspector assigned to this part of the county, and therefore most of these projects kind of fall under your supervision there?
Yeah, I mean, I do most of the sites down there in Crystal City and Pentagon City. So, and because I mean, I just mentioned, you know, the 1900 Crystal, the 2001 South Clark, the Whitmere, the Sage at National Landing. So, and the only one I'm not doing is the Amazon one on Eid Street, but I could certainly, you know, put you in contact with that if someone has a concern there.
Great. Thanks, Carol. Susan.
Yeah. Ben's not here tonight, but the instance that I thought of was just there was apparently not communication between two subcontractors, and all four corners of an intersection were blocked for pedestrian, and he was pushing a stroller with his daughter in it to daycare through the streets, and it was not fun. So, I mean, generally the contractors are pretty good about having contacts about that, and I think it did get resolved, but it's like when there's a screw up, which periodically there is, it's just always good to know who's, you know, what the chain of command is, but also just who do you go to get it fixed quickly if something happens. So.
Thanks, Susan.
You know, this was a project or actually multiple projects at 15th and Eads. So you had the Amazon building up streetscape on the west side and county projects on the east side. And there was a time when there was absolutely no access at the southeast corner for a long time. And it's a huge mega block, and people were not happy about that. But again, that would not be you, that would be DES, right?
Yeah, that'd be a
Yeah.
Department of Environmental
Yeah.
Services.
A lot of our issues are for DES.
Well, it's a very heavily pedestrian area. So.
Right.
Yep. And bikes and cars, all the above, transit.
Well, thanks, Aaron. Yeah, the only issue I've noticed over time has been fasteners in the streets, where you end up picking up a nail or something that's spilled out of somebody's truck. Do they have a requirement to sweep up the streets or, you know, do anything?
Usually there's a site plan condition. Like a lot of sites that I encounter, they'll have like these really thick grates at the entrance of the site, and that's just kind of, you know, in case there's debris on the truck that's that's hauling something away. It's just to kind of capture that. But yeah, there's a site plan condition attached that's functionally similar to that to keep the streets clean.
Okay. All right. So you're going to be the good point of contact for the coordination, any particular site, and even coordination, but among the sites. And then there's the DES element. Is that you just? Are you the clearinghouse? Do you coordinate with them when you need to, or?
Yeah, I mean, I have Matt just put in the contact issue for right-of-way issues, Jerome Miller. I actually talked to him earlier today. I let him know that I was going to be attending this tonight, and he said no problem putting his contact information. So if it's something on the site, it's me. If it's something in the street, it's Jerome.
Yeah, great. Okay, let me just checking with Carol and Pam, since you're probably the closest. Does this sound pretty good? We've got a couple points of contact. Any other things that come to mind?
Yeah, this is great. Maybe we could get Jerome Miller to come another time.
Definitely.
Okay.
And then you have a whole bunch of pedestrians and bicyclists showing up too.
And I just put your contact information to our newsletter that's going out Friday, so you may get some contacts.
It's okay.
Awesome. Great. Very helpful. Thank you. Any other questions from anybody? Okay. All right. Great. Okay. Let's. Thanks again, Aaron, and I'm sure we'll be in touch. And
thank you very much.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Aaron.
Okay, let's move to the last topic of the night, and this is going to come back on the amenities discussion. And so I apologize again, I dropped the ball on this, but we do have a request initiated really from Aaron Schreiber last year, who said, hey, you guys should revalidate your amenities and community benefits requests regularly so that the county can stay on top of it. Matt, you said there's a lot in the pipeline now, which sounds like this is a time to really revalidate the amenities requests. And where we sat last time was we had these large requests, large amenities that really clearly exceed the ability of any one site to provision, and that was one of the questions that needed to be addressed. And so I think the notes we had was we need to figure out how the county proposed to address those types of large amenities. And then we had to figure out a mechanism for going back to our how the council would revalidate the requests and do all that in time to impact this next round of projects and the CIP update, which I think will be around February or March of next year. Okay, so I think that's where we stand on what we need to do. Let's see, hockey and basketball arenas notwithstanding, I think our main needs are still in the community center, the school, open space, and let's see, I think there was one more.
The theater, Cinetic.
Yeah, the kind of the, how do we, kind of arts theater, performance space is distinguished from community center. Yeah. So we do need to get that question into Matt so so the county can kind of formally answer the question. We have, on occasion, talking to the county, we've heard that they're open to pooling money and across sites, but it also sounds like that sometimes has not worked that well. Money has gotten it's hard to track the money, and then we have this ongoing need for or drive for concurrency where we try to get the services, the amenities delivered in some kind of time scale related to the building itself. Okay, so with that, I think where we were going to go next was write that letter, but then we also really need to talk about the process for re-verifying or revalidating the major amenities that are still outstanding. I guess I'd open it to the floor. Any proposals on how to kind of do that revalidation? Do we want to just, and we should do this probably in our September meeting, identify the big ticket items, limit ourselves to the big tickets as opposed to every last little thing, and then revalidate this as a group. Any thoughts on this? Oh, Matt, your hand is up.
No, I think just to help folks chime in and think about how to achieve this, I think what I really found helpful in the other Aaron's presentation 3-4 months ago, whenever we last discussed this, was really viewing this opportunity in the letter as really a way to update or provide another chapter to the livability documents. And I think there was a lot of benefit in maybe revisiting the objectives and goals that were stated in those 2019, 2020 documents that spoke to here's what our expectations are as development happens in the area. And then maybe attaching to that or comparing against that, the kind of matrix we developed summarizing the last 8, 10, 12 projects that have been approved by the board and the way in which I think they distributed the community benefits. And kind of between those two things, I think the gap or missed opportunities become very clear. And it's really those ones that Mike just mentioned, the big ticket items that no single or even handful of projects might deliver on their own, it's going to require some combination of private and public funds, and a long-term strategy for that. I think using this letter to formally acknowledge what those are, and I think the continued express need for this group and the 3 civic associations to keep calling for it, I think might be very helpful.
Great. So I do think there is a desire among the community to kind of go back and kind of see where the community is at in terms of some of these amenities. Probably good to, some amenities are in the pipeline, and so we'd have to communicate to the community that there are things that haven't happened but are going to happen, and then there's things where we haven't made a lot of progress yet. Susan, you had your hand up. Did you have something you were thinking about? Oh, let's go to Carol.
Just to say that I've had some informal conversations with people, and we need to have some kind of coming together of heads so that we can say, what would the outreach process look like? Are we going to have people prioritize sort of a ranked choice voting kind of thing, so that we get a sense of which things seem the most urgent to the greatest number of people, not that, and then some kind of reality check where at the same time we're collecting information, we're also feeding information back that this is like a long, patient process, and there's a limit to what we can expect. It's some expectation setting, but some we want to keep the pressure on, because we know we're going to need stuff. We know it takes a long time to come in, and we feel like we're always behind. So.
Yep. Go ahead, Carol.
Yeah, second what Susan just said, that there's a lot that's involved in this, but Mike, you're kind of on the spot because you wear 2 hats. You're both the chair of this committee, which is broader, and you are also our leader on Livability 22202. I just went back and I looked at our SIP letter, for example, because this group has mostly been involved in the CIP and on the things that we thought were important for that. And they are partially in the CIP at different levels and different years, because our priorities there were funding for development of the 18th Street Metro Plaza Square, funding for the Center Park with 1900, and a master plan for the Virginia Highlands Park. Whereas the livability priorities are much broader and include the school and include the performance arts center with that. So I think the 2 things have to go on simultaneously. We're looking for you to convene a meeting of Livability 22202 so we can have our collective thoughts about the broad issues for our priorities, which could then feed into this group as well for the September meeting, to broaden out beyond the more limited CIP funding issues, because we didn't do the broad scope. We did it much more focused on what we thought the CIP actually might deal with. So that's my comments. They've got to be simultaneous.
Yeah, or they have to occur in very quick order. Yes. Okay. Yeah, we could do that. We could get the principals together on the livability, and then figure out how to update that, get out, do some outreach to the civic associations, and then get things in place for this council to look at it in terms of the types of things that livability doesn't look at, which is, funding and TIFs and timing and phasing and all that.
Right. And I just want to throw out there one other thing, and I know it's near and dear to your heart, and that is not something that this group has particularly focused on, but at some point we need to get a campaign started for Roach's Run. And somehow to work with that. And I know that there's something that's going on with the negotiations between JBG and the county and the National Park Service about parcels there on Roach's Run. But on the whole concept, unless the county comes up and starts pushing for something to be done on Roach's Run, it's not going to happen. So I just want to throw that out there. We should not forget that. That was a livability concept, but I know it's something the bid is very interested in. JBG would like it as well.
Okay. All right. All right. So definitely, let's preface this with the livability update with that team, and then we'll feed that into the council and get some get the thoughts of the larger group of the commissions and developers, business owners, and so forth, and then we can get something that's pretty tight for the county to work with. Does that sound about the right thing, Matt? What are your thoughts? Oh, you there?
Yeah, couldn't get my mute button to work. No, I think it makes sense because a letter like that, and I remember in past instances, immediately wants to make sure that necessary parties are involved and represented. As great of a job as I think the leadership is doing, you always want to have those touching points with a greater community and kind of verify, are these still the objectives? And I'm sure when any subsequent conversations with board members or the county manager might surface, that question is likely to come up. You know, have you heard from the community recently? Have they affirmed this list?
Yeah.
So I think having additional voices is only going to strengthen, I think, the position you're going to frame in that.
Yeah, very good point. So we'll go all the way back to civic associations through livability into the council, get the bid, and we'll get things pretty tight. And if we do that, then you've got something you can work with pretty firmly. Jeff.
So on the amenity side, I'm not sure if it's actually amenity, but what I hear at every civic association when I attend the Aurora Highlands and Arlington Ridge is elementary school, elementary school, elementary school. And is that really an amenity that should be delivered with projects? It is, I think, one of the primary asks and wants. But I don't know if we can put it in there as a rank. The other part of it is the community center, I think, is something we have kind of desired to have a community meeting area. But that actually, to me, in some ways makes sense to be delivered with a school, a joint facility. But again, I'm not sure if this is, how, development for projects feed into this. And then finally, yeah, I'm very much interested in the Roach's Run / Woodland Walk, JBG Woods connection to the rail station and the CC to DCA that we kind of explored at the livability conference. But I don't know how much other members of the community are even aware of that or if it's even on their radar.
Right. Good. Yeah. Good point, Jeff. Some of this is awareness. The school is considered, an amenity, but its funding mechanism is very different. Could be very different, and it's not necessarily something that goes right to a site plan. So, but that's the kind of thing that I think when we work with the county, they can start to get a little bit more aligned, and it comes through, the school board. But I think that is actually something that they, because of the way the county is split between a school board and a county board, that the efforts of the community are actually even more important there to be able to advocate for that. Okay, and Roach's Run, I hear you. I remember going out on the walk with you. That was a long time ago, but yeah, see if we can figure out how to get that going. All right, Matt.
All right, I know we're almost at 9, so the last thing I'll mention is the other critical piece of the timing and nature of this letter is that there's a number of things, maybe not everything, but there's a number of items, the big ticket items that are going to be listed on there that you don't want, I think, the county board or the county manager to hold off on until the Virginia Highlands Master Planning Park process begins. I think the thinking on that, the search for sites, the at least discussions, you got to have at least discussions. Those have to happen now because that master planning effort is going to be here before you know it. I mean, I think right now is what, fiscal year 2028. I mean, that's right around the corner based on the way these things are speeding up. So I think there's some trial and error, some initial discussions, some lessons learned, I think could really be beneficial in the upcoming years with these projects that are coming online, and maybe other sites and other initiatives that some might, offer. So by the time the park master planning effort begins, we have such a better position to begin those conversations on, and maybe, reach a much better outcome.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, even in the worst case, if all we've done is simply exhaust all the alternatives, at least people will then be able to focus on what's left. But yeah.
And one of the things that we haven't taken into consideration is we're about to lose Cinetic. Their lease goes through March 2024. JBG has no plan for them, and nobody else has any plan for them that I know of. So we're going to lose Cinetic.
When in 2024?
March.
March, okay. Well, 9 months. Okay. Okay. All right, so the actions we'll take are to, we'll get and put our other hats on, get the livability group together, and re-verify, update everybody on where we think things are at for amenities, focus on these critical things, which are going to take a lot of work yet, and then we'll get. I think probably what we'd want to do is have Carol just thinking, make a presentation or something for the September meeting of the council, so that we can start to involve the council in it. That might be a little tight, given that we have to get the civic associations fully weighed in, but something in that sequence.
Yeah, we should at least get livability together as soon as we can to start working on that, because it's going to be more than one meeting. Yeah. And as I said, Crystal City Civic Association isn't meeting until September now. We go on hiatus in the summer, unlike some of the others.
Yep. Okay.
August not meeting until September either.
Okay. All right, and then, oh, is that you, Pam? Okay.
Not meeting either, or doing newsletters.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right, we will take that on. All right, we're right at 9 o'clock. Any last items from anybody? Okay. All right. Well, let's call it a meeting. Thank you all for attending, and I hope you have great summers. And we'll be setting up our meeting for kind of probably the third week of September. I'll send a note out in the next week or so and see if we can get that date nailed down, and then we'll see you then. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.